Hey, this is Samir, and this is just another quick tutorial on subgrid layers and adding details to a subgrid layer, because I noticed in the DPIT community forums that a lot of people have problems generating these details in the subgrid layers, and I wonder why that is the case. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight and some tips and advices on how to accomplish that. The first thing probably that should be noticed is that we're using vorticity particles, the bits vorticity particles, to add the details. So this also makes it quite scene dependent how the details will work. But the most important thing is that first of all you use enough particles to create these details. If you want small scale details in a large scale simulation, you need to have an according amount of particles to generate these small details. You know, one particle can't generate 1,000 small details. You need 1,000 small particles. Well, okay, but let's look at this very simple setup I have here, which is just the default setup with the container box that we see here being made a little larger along the axis. So in the gas solver and the space tab, I have changed the grid size to 8 meters, 5 meters, and 5 meters, which gives us this box. Alright, and I have an emitter, also just a cylinder emitter here, which I changed in the shape of the emitter to cylinder, and I rotated it just as usual with the rotating tool of Cinema 4D, and I rescaled it also with the according scaling tool of Cinema 4D. But okay, so we also want the smoke to be pushed out of here in this direction along the y-axis of the object. So I use a little bit of wind emission. So this emitter also creates wind, which pushes the smoke in this direction. And we have the wind direction set to along y, which is always in the space of the emitter. And let's just put some wind in there, like 50, and when I play a simulation, which is still very low res, we can see that it's pushed from here to there, which is absolutely fine. We also have some temperature here set to a rate of 800 per second Kelvin. I just simply reduce this because we don't need that much temperature here, like this. Swoop. Okay, we can see there's not much large scale here. We have 5 meters, so if this container would be in the real world just on your desk, it wouldn't fit on your desk because it is 5 meters along the x-axis. So 8 meters in Cinema 4D are 5 meters in the real world. Alright, so I could also, to make this kind of the same, put this to 8 meters. So 8 meters in Cinema 4D are now also 8 meters in physical size. You know, if I change this, the grid size now to 15 meters along the x-axis, then 50 meters are 8 meters. So 50 meters in Cinema 4D stand for 8 meters in the real world. So I should always adapt this to the according one if I change the x-axis. If I change now the y-axis like this, you don't have to change this physical size value. You know, it is still 15 meters, and along the x-axis are 15 meters in physical size, so in the real world. And the y and z components of the physical size will accordingly adapt internally, so you don't have to worry about that. Well, okay, so let's just put this a little higher, 60, and maybe make this 8. So now we have this smoke being pushed outside. Not enough in my to me. So first of all, I still increase here the simulation to 80, 40, 27. That looks kind of low res, it is, but enough to have still some good motion interaction here. But to really see how much space or grid cells the emitter is taking, we could turn on the grid resolution here. I go to the side view and I see, okay, my emitter only covers sorry, 1, 2, 3 by 4 grid cells. So it's not very much, as you can see, about 15 grid cells in 2 dimensions, and from the top we see we have 3 to 4 grid cells wide interaction of the emitter with the underlying container grid, you know. So only smoke information and wind information are available in these cells that we see, that the cylinder covers. So if I play this now here, we can see how the smoke moves. So I wanted to go much more to the side, and maybe more power here, adding some more wind, like 100, like so. Like that. And it dissipates there. Okay, so let's just turn off dissipation of smoke here in the solver. So this works better. And a lot of people now make the mistake to simply, they don't really see the smoke very good, to increase the smoke rate here. We have a smoke rate of 1, so 100% density in a smoke cell, and they always tend to make this higher to better see the smoke here in the editor, you know. But the bad thing about this is that the smoke cells are now very densely filled. So later on in the shader, you don't have much choice to modulate the smoke to make it thicker or thinner, you know, because it is already the information. If you have an image which is completely white, you know, like if we would have 100% smoke in each cell, then you are of course not able to distinguish any details, you know, like you would with a noise. If you have a noise, a 2D noise on an image, you can tweak the exposure, the contrast, the brightness, and you could modulate the result, make it more contrasty and such things. But if you have 100% white, pure white everywhere, which you would have if you have too much density in all these cells, it makes it really hard to edit the smoke density later on in the shader. So very important, don't panic if you don't see that much smoke in your simulation, and rather keep it low, you know, like this. And once you are working with the shader, for example, if I render this now, I do have the chance now to edit my smoke density by this gradient in the shader, rather than doing it in the simulation, you know, like this. And I have now the chance to play a lot more here with the density, and you know, better modulate where thicker areas and thinner, less dense areas are in the smoke. So don't make the mistake and use too much smoke grid in the simulation directly, but rather do it in post with the shader. Gives you a lot more freedom to work with the fluids and to modulate the visual result of the rendering. Alright, so I still make this a little bigger here for the sake of it, and I increase the wind to have a much stronger push here, And I also make this a duration, so the emission of the wind should only last for, let's say, 75 frames. You know, and the good thing is that I can now modulate the emission over time, like this, for example. So get a more pushy behavior, and I make this more linear. Swoop like this. Okay, so for now, placement, you can see we got a more pulsing thing here. And you can also see that this gives us, of course, a lot more details than a simple push, constant push. So I can now, of course, as I told before, modulate the result here much better in the gradient, like this. Let's make this more white. And at a light we can see how the smoke is reacting here. Swoop. Okay, but we can also see that there's not a lot of detail here, because we have a very low res version here. And so now is the time to, first of all, make some more things to make this low res simulation better, because the subgrids really do depend on the low res simulation. If the low res simulation is not good, then the subgrid layer simulation won't be good either. So they really are connected. The subgrid layers take the motion information, so the velocities of the fluid motion, as their ground truth, to create more smaller vortices and details, turbulences in the subgrid layers. So the lowest version has to be good, or has to be optimized to easier create details in the subgrid layers. Okay, so let's go into the fluid option here. First of all, I take out the viscosity, because, you know, this is a grid cell simulation, so there, just like as in an image, there are interpolations in the grids, and therefore there will be small amounts of diffusion in the velocities anyway. So we don't need viscosity, because smoke and gases naturally have a very low viscosity value, so we could also get rid of it to make this work, which we do. I also set the density to 1.23, because in this gas simulation of smoke, this density is the air density, the density of air, which is 1.23 approximately on our sea level, and so I'll keep it that way. Okay, and the next thing I do is I turn off automatic iterations in the solver details, because I want the quality to be as high as possible, and this is going to be fast because it is still low res, so it calculates pretty fast. So I increase this solver accuracy, and I also increase the max iterations as high as possible, set it to 1000. So we got the solver covered now, which is taking care of all the pressure stuff inside internally. I also set this time step mode to CFL and use well, let's say 3 or 4 sub steps. Why not 5? I mean, it's still low res, as I told you, and so we get with the sub steps more quality of the simulation, especially if we are working with higher velocities, where smoke is moving past several grid cells. If we wouldn't take sub steps, then this is very beneficial. While it is calculating here, I'll also take a look at the simulation features. In this case, I don't have to change much here. All I will do is first of all activate the turbulence. While it's recalculating already, I could have cached it. This would have been easier. We could see the whole thing moving now, but I'm still tweaking, so I don't do that. And I kind of know and see what happens there. So I could now also increase here the turbulence, because this is more a matter of experience. I noticed that the more vorticity is used in the simulation layer, the better the vorticities in the subgrid layers are generated. I just increased this to 300 so we didn't lose this every time. And you can already see with the increased intensity of the global swirling and the turbulence settings, we get a lot more smaller details here in the simulation layer already. But this is quite a little too much in my opinion, so I put this to 0.15 and run this simulation again. Well, I could have taken the emitter a little higher. I just noticed, you know, like to have the emitter, or to give the emitter a little more space between the boundaries of the container. Here, you know, we only have one grid cell here to the sides and to the bottom. From the top, we see that we have a lot of space here to the sides, but only a few to the to this container wall. So I probably take this a little more to that way, because you know, fluids always create kind of a spherical force field around it. That's just how fluids behave. You know, that mushroom shapey thing is really a fluid property. And to let this evolve around the emitter, I take this a little further outside. No, there's nothing to be afraid of to modulate this emission even with some noise in the smoke settings here, right? But as I want a lot of details in this large scale smoke simulation, which we can see has some details now in here like this, so this rendering is quite not nice. So let's just change some of the parameters here just to see how this looks. It looks a little more natural to me. Okay, so next thing, now that we have some global quality settings set for the simulation, there's not much more I can do. I could of course change from grid emission to particle emission, so I would use fluid particles for this whole thing, but I keep it simple. And let's now go into the subgrid layer stuff. Okay, so let's just create one subgrid layer, and you can see how this changes the grid. The lower grid is completely doubled in resolution, exponentially actually. So I can now turn off this grid. I've seen enough of it. I'm going to turn also off the container. And you can already see now that with the usage of a subgrid layer, we get, well, kind of a smoother and more visually more detailed representation of the smoke, you know, like this. So Also, the rendered result may look a little smoother. In this case, I give you the first advice, which is of course using a nice advection time step here for the smoke. Not sure if that's enough now. Maybe we can choose this here, and we get a little more defined shape of the whole thing. Of course, we can still also use all the settings here to change how this looks like so. But okay, let's now take a look at the vorticity particles. Well, here we have the vorticity particles now, and we want to emit into the subgrid layer that we just created. But well, actually I do know now that if I show the info that I only have 307,000 cells in the rendering, so 750,000 approximately. So I tell myself, alright, that's a little low, so I increase the subgrids once again to 2 layers, so it is 4 times this resolution now, so 80. Then with the first subgrid layer it would be 160, and with the second subgrid layer it would be 320. And if I type this in here just for the information, not in the editor, because it would now allocate all the stuff already in the editor, so I change the rendering and don't have to worry about the memory, because I only want the information. And in the end I would have 37 million. Oh no, that's not true. It's of course my fault. I just wanted to show you how much the grid cells are. 320 by 170 by 107. Let's put this back to 80, and in the end I would have about 6 million grid cells here in rendering, during rendering, and also in the editor now. So when I play simulation here, I don't see it because it looks low density. So I changed the smoke density in the shader, and I can see the smoke much better here. So well, let's do test rendering for this like this, and we can see this looks a lot more defined now, only by using subgrid layers. So let's do this, and I now emit into the second subgrid layer, because we have 2 layers, and I tend to always use vorticity particles to anti-test to the last layer, which is not a necessity. You can also emit into lower layers. That's absolutely your choice, and it really depends on the scene. But it's just my workflow. I don't know. See it as just as a tip. Okay, and I keep the alignment cylindrical, which means that if I would look at the cylinder now here, and we create some vorticity particles, then I would know that the alignment would be that, for example, this little particle here would have an alignment to this direction here, like this. This one would have an alignment like this. So all are pointing outward of the center of the cylinder, you know, depending on their location, of course. And I do know then that if I push the smoke outside into the y direction, that the particles would then kind of fold that way. So the force is into the y direction, and the particles would go this way, you know, like a vortex, like a vortex. So if it's pushed here and the alignment is into this direction, then this would be like in this direction the vorticity would be created. And this is what I want. This is actually what billowing is, right? So I have 500 samples per frame here, which is just absolutely fine. I know I'm the wind is pushing out for 75 frames, so I set this for the duration here in the particles in the smoke. Oh, and I keep the temperature. So all these stuff, smoke, wind, and vorticity particles are now generated only for the first 75 frames. Like this. Okay, so, and now I am pushing this smoke outside. And we can already see the particles working in the subgrid layer. But not enough for now. But let's just, so to, in order to give you a better insight and make this a little faster, I slow this, I decrease the subgrid layers and only use one subgrid layer. And of course also change here the target layer to subgrid layer 1. And keep the settings. You can already see this has a much stronger effect now here. So I changed the settings in the subgrid layer. Like I have 6 poly and the intensity is set to 4, which is fine though. You know, the radius is 5, so each particle covers 5 grid cells. It's a little high for what we do now, and with low subgrid resolution. And I rather decrease the stretching, which also is the reason for the folding of the particles, so the generation of vortices. And you can see now here, if I now render this, that we have a lot more turbulence now here in that layer. So I can further decrease here the vortex stretching like this. You can see now how this works, less folding happens. And it's not enough, so what I can do now, of course, is increase the intensity. You can see now here in this area that a lot more details are created now. Here we can see now nice more smaller details. Let's do this again, and this time I turn off the vorticity particles so we can see exactly how the smoke is affected. Here we can see small details, turbulences being generated. Right? So it is really a matter of setting this up correctly to get nice details in here, and I can now of course tweak all this stuff and maybe make the color a little different, like, I don't know, like this. And very important, of course, are also lighting of the smoke. Definitely is something you should always consider changing. Where's that light now? There you go. Increase this here to 150 and make this one a little less. Give it a slight bluish thing. Now change here, first of all, density. This here, it's a little too dark. And also make ooh, this one, a sunny day in June. Give it a yellowish color. Maybe it was a little too strong. So can also lower this here, and I could now use here either the density multiplier like this and get a much stronger visual feedback here, and but not enough. I could also of course now increase here the samples of the vorticity particles. We don't see it now here, but we see the result actually. You see already how much more turbulence is going on here. So this is one of the things we need to do. We can also of course change some more settings or whatever, but we of course need also to change the settings here in the subgrid layers, and you can see that we have different modes here for the fallout type of the turbulences that are generated. So we have 6 poly here. This is the kernel. I could also use a spiky kernel, and for this I do increase this again so we can see it better. You can see we get a lot more spikier details in here than we did with the previous kernel. We have a very high density here now. Like this. So this is how we can add more details to the subgrids, and we could now tweak a lot more of the settings here. For example, increase the intensity. What can also change here is the precision, and I lower the sub steps so they're calculated a little faster. Now we can see we have a lot more details now here, more turbulences, vortices. Also make sure that you play with the alignments, because this was just one example. You could also use, for example, a random alignment, you know, and this would result in a different distribution of the turbulences. This, and if I change to, let's say, z-axis, this would give us a completely different turbulence result. So it's really important to play with these settings and just find out what is the right one to give you the details you're looking for. And of course we still need a higher resolution here, so I use a second subgrid layer and I put these into the second subgrid layer, and I could of course now also increase the samples to keep the scale the same approximately. Also you see the spiky one, you see same settings, that we had in simulation 1. Only last layer turned off, so we can see the first layer. 0.02, 3, and 15. But as I do know that the second subgrid layer will have double as much cells as, exponentially double as much cells as the first layer, I do know that this radius, which is given in grid cells, will be a lot smaller. So I could increase this to, let's say, 5 or 6. You can see we get a lot nice billowing here. Just play this on, we don't see that much, so I go back into the shader and just increase the density for the sake of display. And you can already see that we have nice little, a lot of funky, chunky, vorticey turbulences here. And let's just put this down again. So you can also increase the phase here. Higher. These are self-shadowing. Keep playing with the settings. So, but this looks quite nice to me. I'm not sure how it will look like during rendering. So now is the time to make a test rendering. I have set up everything. I can see it in the editor. It's about what I imagined, having a lot more details in a rather larger scale simulation. It's not that large scale, only 15 meters, but so a rather mid-scale. But okay, let's just test this. And I do know now that this, even if it doesn't work out during rendering now, because maybe the billowing is too strong or looks too noisy or whatever, all I need to do now then is lowering here the intensity, for example, or radius or vortex stretching. I do this with each test rendering now, because I've set up now everything, and I've approximately my shader ready. I have the density that I want from the shader, and about the color, and the lighting is ready. Very important, really. The lighting is ready is an important fact. You know, of course you can do it afterward, you know, lighting the smoke, but you really should know, then have some experience how the smoke shader changes react to light changes. So I advise especially beginners to have the lighting ready, and so this works out best for you. But you can of course do it as you want. Just an advice. Okay, so I see that it is a very strong effect in the first place, so I put this down to 13 just for the sake of it. And now that I know that I have everything set up, I would turn on the caching, which I don't do now here, but at least I just do some stuff here. Let's make this simple, increase this all frames, and okay, but before we start the rendering now, when I do test render here in the editor, I can see kind of these artifacts here, which I can of course get rid of by changing the settings here and the quality settings in the shader. So for example, I lower the hit step to 4 and the step size to 1. Also, I lower now the advection time step. It's probably too strong if we have all the details in there, and also these small scale details are advected or transported during rendering too much, so it won't look natural anymore, or gets too noisy motion wise. So don't set this too high, even if you if it looks nice with a lower resolution. The higher the resolution you go, probably the lower the advection time step could be. I definitely advise to test this, right? Okay, so the next thing we do is we also, first of all, let's render this. Still looks that way, but let's also do some better options here in the self-shadowing of the smoke. So the hit step is set here to 5, and I put the step size here to 2, like this. Alright, so what else I can do is, of course, also modulate now the emission of the smoke, because right now we have the smoke being kind of constantly in its density emission. And what I do is I can use another fall off. For example, if I use a linear fall off, it will linearly fade out, and this looks maybe a little smoother, right? So let's do this, and we'll let this do its calculations slowly, because I want to check these shader improvements in the actual simulation. Of course, you could also first render it, the whole simulation, with all the necessary data like the smoke channel, etc., and then use the cache for tweaking the shader, which is probably even the better idea, because you can work much faster and you can check for all the frames that you have in your simulation how your shader settings will look like, and not only in this very frame that we see in the editor. But for the sake of ease in this tutorial, I do this now just on the fly. Okay, so I stop this now. We have about 15 frames here. I'm still calculating steps. I clicked already, but it has to finish that time step. Okay, so now I can do a test rendering here. And I better like what I see now here, but I still want to do something else to speeden this up, the rendering. I use a custom cell size for the light map that is generated, and I use approximately the half of the final resolution, which was, if you remember correctly, 4 times this value with 2 subgrid layers, so 80, 160, 320. So 320, and I set this here to 150, so a little lower than the half of it. Well, if I now render, this will prepare much faster, and it will speed up my rendering, right? Okay, so that should be about it that I change here. Maybe I could increase the jittering a little more. Well, I can also use a cubic render interpolation to get a little more detailed interpolations, but that would be about it. So let's just do a test rendering right away. look at the result in a second. Alright, so now we can have a look at the result here. I only rendered 45 frames, but we can see how the details and billowing is happening due to the vorticity particles in the subgrid layer now here. It's a little strong maybe for my taste. So what I do now is I decrease the intensity, like 10 for example. That should do it. Otherwise I am pretty fine with the results, also with the vortices belonging to the result. I quite like the motion. So what I could also still do is, which I just noticed, you could of course change the transfer interpolation to cubic and the simulation low res simulation. Could do the same here for the motion too, but it's not that important here in this case. I maybe use a mid precision transport for the transport precision. Also here for the smoke. I don't do it for the temperature, it's not really necessary, it's not visible and doesn't have that much of an effect on this simulation, so I can keep it at a low resolution quality settings, and it will take less simulation time. Well, and I also changed here in the emitter the fall off to a custom mode. Gotta flip mirror that one and use it more like this, because although it is where is it? Nicely smooth in the first frame, I would like it to be a little denser, you know, especially when it comes out here now. I would like to have it a more fluffy look somehow. So I know I need more density in my simulation. Of course, I could also tweak it in the shader, but as I already showed you that, I just wanted to show you how you can work with the fall off here, with a spline fall off. And it's a little denser here, but still gets kind of a fluffy appearance on the outside. And of course, as I told you before, you can also modulate the whole thing with some noise. Let's just make it knocky. Looks quite good. Make this higher contrasted. We can see this now already in the editor. It's maybe a little too big. Let's make it like that. And we already get a more kind of modulated appearance here in the editor. And as I see here that it is quite a grayish option here, I could also now increase a little bit the smoke rate to 1.5 for example, and I also give this an animation speed, so it's not that homogeneous in the first place. So I also then get naturally some more details or structure in the smoke, and you can see this is more fluffy than it was in our rendering here. Let's just try to compare this, make this at frame 10, and let's have a look at frame 10 here in our editor. Actually, we'll look at frame 9 now, but it should be enough. Yeah, you can see there's some more fluffy state to it. Oh. Come on here, grab that one. keep this at 100%. Like this. So, well, I like that. It's okay. Well, so with these changes, we're gonna do another rendering, which we'll see in a second. Alright, and this is the result now. So let's just compare it to the first one here, this one. Yeah, the second one definitely looks more natural. Turbulences are not as strong, not too strong like in here, where it becomes kind of too turbulent, and this looks more like a good push. Maybe we could increase the smoke dissipation now a little, so it doesn't clutter this whole thing now here. And of course there's still some options that could be tweaked in the shader, but let's just make this final adjustment to the smoke channel. Let's, I don't know, 0.01, or let's try a little higher just to get a nice effect, maybe 0.04. I like the density here too. Well, one could still change this a little. For example, let's just try this. Use a higher albedo so it becomes a little brighter and more more dense, definitely less transparent. We keep the absorption in the face function here. We keep Greenstein, which is a good approximation for thick smoke here, and in the anisotropy setting we could lower this to, let's say, 33, and you can see the whole thing gets a little brighter. I show you again like this, and only a lot more the edges where the sun comes from are lightened. And if I lower this, this gets more isotropic, so more evenly distributed light. So this all gets a little brighter at all, and the eye sees this a little denser then. Well, alright, I like that. I could maybe play a little with the density multiplier, increase it a little. Don't be afraid to use more extreme settings, even when you're only testing. So, okay, this looks good. Maybe we could, I don't know, I really like the kind of detail appearance here. It's good. It's good. It's nice. It's nice. All right. So let's do another last try, and then I keep this to yourself to try this out yourself and start playing with the settings from this point on and see what the effect is, especially with the turbulence settings in the subgrid layers. Really, you could, for example, now try using higher radius, see the effect, which is, of course, bigger details, bigger blobs, bigger turbulence details, and lower radius mean smaller details. Of course, you need to know this is in grid cells, so you kind of see how big a grid cell is and then decide what a good radius would be. So if we only would have one subgrid layer, as we have seen before, 6 grid cells would be quite a big area. But with 2 subgrid layers, 6 grid cells are much less, cover much less area, so the details are accordingly smaller. So if we would use a third one here now, we would actually know that even if we keep 6, the details would become smaller because more cells are there and 6 cells are then in a smaller area. So you can either adapt this then or whatever, right? Sometimes when you change, for example, when you choose a lower radius, then the forces become less strong, of course. So you may want to try with lower radiuses. If you decrease it, if I would decrease it to 3 now, I would, for example, change the intensity to 15 or something, just because I think or assume that the details will have less effect on the visual appearance because they cover less grid cells, and so maybe I need a stronger force to make them stand out a little more. But as I said, just play with these settings, change 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 settings just to see. Of course, you also could do even more. You can add a dependency, for example, smoke density, so it will generate a stronger, the intensity is stronger where a lot of smoke density is, or high smoke density, and it would be lower in areas with less densities, smoke densities. So there's a lot to play with, and if you want to learn how this whole thing reacts to each other and how the settings react, you really should try all these out. Just take a Sunday and just try it, right? Okay, so I'm rendering this once again, and then I show it to you in a second, and see you then. Okay, and this is the results, and as we can see, we have a way too strong dissipation here for the low density that we have in our simulation. So there are 2 ways, of course. First of all, I could simply decrease the dissipation here and make it disappear slowlier, but I know that I still have a lot of room for increasing my smoke rate. So because maybe I don't want the smoke to dissipate slower, I just want more smoke to be available, so it also takes longer to dissipate. So I can change this here to maybe, let's say, 4. You can already see in the editor that it becomes much denser now here, and also during our rendering I know it's gonna be much denser, and I could render this now. Maybe I do decrease this value slightly, because it is quite fast in its disappearance. So 0.3, and again I am rendering. You gotta get used to this, just changing a few settings, 1, 2 or 3, then do the test rendering. You don't have to do it for all frames. You can just do a little preview here, as I do 45 frames of 300, and then you can go on, and once you have everything set up, you can do the whole thing. But as I said, sometimes you just have the cache, and this works much faster than